Okay. Good evening, everyone. This is Julian Midlow. This is the Transportation Advisory Board meeting for August 28th. We're getting started at 6:05 p.m. And we will kick off with an approval of the minutes of the July meeting. Are there any comments or suggested revisions? Let me know now. There's none. None. In that case, we will unanimously pass these minutes by unanimous consent. Okay, and now we will move on to public comments. I'll note we can start with this email that we received a couple of days ago from Connie Marsh. I'm just highlighting a couple of the topics she wrote about in there in terms of synthesizing the parks and mobility plans together. Walking experience, we discussed walking experience and destination walking, and to include that into our plans. So I encourage everyone to read that if they haven't already. But now, is there anyone online?
There's no online.
No online. Okay. There's no one here. So at that point, we will get started with the regular business. And the only item there is mobility master plan updates. Get started with that.
Great, thank you, Chair. Hello, everyone. My name is Thomas Feldrez. I think I've met most of you by now, but I'm the senior planner at Issaquah, and I will be talking about the mobility master plan update. So I am here to get your feedback on the proposed updates to the mobility master plan, and I have a couple questions. First, just wanting to get your feedback on if the proposed changes to the implementation actions are agreeable to the board. This is part of the packet as attachment B. And second question is, are there any additional changes that the board would like to see? Just to summarize, at a very high level, the first thing you'll notice is that the proposed document, we're proposing to change the name. This is related to many discussions that we've had internally as Issaquah staff, but also it's been brought up by the equity board, making sure that we are using words correctly, that we're not using words that have other meanings and might be considered bad form. So the name itself, we're proposing to update, and this is just sort of aligned with best practices and being inclusive in Issaquah. Second, we're hoping to just do some minor updates to housekeeping items. The document was last updated a couple of years ago, so you can imagine there's just been some little changes that we need to make to tweak the document. We've updated our existing and future conditions analysis. A lot of this was related to the transit study and sort of knowing more about what transit is going to look like in the near term and in the future. And sort of access to transit. There's also revisions mostly related to the implementation actions as part of attachment B. These are related to transit and equity, sustainability, and climate resiliency. These are all topics that we brought to the board in October as part of the transportation element discussions. So these are sort of flowing from the transportation element and then are actions that we're hoping to propose. There's new updates to the transportation element goals and policies that we mentioned back in October. This board had that opportunity to provide feedback on. So we're literally just like referencing that document, which is this document implements the latter. Excuse me. Then finally, amendments to the actions just to better implement that transportation element. So jumping right in, I think I'm going to defer to the chair on this one, but my goal here is just to go slide by slide. and really go through each of these actions, and then I'll pause. And I think if the chair is agreeable to that, we can just stop there, and then we'll get board feedback. So, sounds good. Okay. So just right off the bat, the title, the intention of changing the name of the document is just to reduce unintentional harm. The word master has negative connotations to many folks, so we're just trying to use more inclusive language here. Implementation really does say what the document adds, so we feel that the title change, just implementation instead of master, sort of speaks for itself, and just reduces words that have double meanings and negative connotations. Yeah.
I have a question about both that one and stakeholders as far as data supporting that and what's changing as opposed to master plan and master stream. Those are all, from an engineering standpoint, kind of the lead one. And so yeah, I feel I just get concerned where it's changed so much language of certain words without, and maybe I'm picking on one that's more simple, but just changing words because someone might think it is as opposed to it might be more database as far as what that intention or.
Yeah, and it is really hard. Like in the project management field, which is a whole field in its own, like that word stakeholder is just, that is everywhere. And it's something that I am trying to unlearn myself. But these words to certain people that live in the community really do, it creates like a negative feeling. And in many ways, it just like, it's one of many little microaggressions that prevent someone from like actually engaging with the community or like the government that is supposed to serve them. So yeah, there's a couple instances that I've highlighted throughout the document, and I'm glad that you caught that because that was probably in page 400 or something. But yeah, like these words, there's a couple instances where we did catch that. And we've done a lot of work in the equity space, and we're just trying to like really implement that starting in the document level, and then hopefully like these words will like transform into actions that we take later. So yeah, we're just trying to be we're trying to use our words carefully, and that really just starts with like the documents that are sort of implementing what we're doing. But I do acknowledge that, yeah, that word is like, it is useful in many ways, but we can find other words to say the same thing.
We include other cities, like entities or like these changes as well.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I want to say that Seattle does this. I think King County does this as well. I am very much a transportation planner, and like I do my best to like keep up to date in this, but this is like, I'm just trying to implement it in my own way. So I know that we have an equity board, so maybe I can bring that to them next week when I talk to them and like sort of see who else is doing this. But it is a best practice, and my understanding is that we're all doing our best to like be more inclusive. Yeah.
It's in the next question. It was, did this request for changing come from the equity board, from out in the community, or like internally as staff?
Yeah, so I think the way I would answer that is, so staff internally, we have an equity team, which I'm a part of, and part of the team created a glossary of words that are considered harmful. That was brought to the equity board, I believe in like April or May or something. So they've had that opportunity to like comment on it. I think it's nearly approved, or maybe it is approved at this point. But this is really like the first document that we're like sort of using the glossary in. So I expect this to flow into other documents, but I guess this is probably the first one that we're doing.
So I consider myself pretty sensitive to the language I use, and I try and be very thoughtful and I'm open to hearing things. So something that came out of work probably 2 years ago about not to talk about something as a final solution, right? I'm Jewish. I'm not bothered by that at all. I recognize some people may be, some people are not. But the people that were doing this, they're not Jewish, they're just like, oh, we read on something, this is not a good thing to use. And it's like, in every other connotation, it means, you've worked on a bunch of solutions, this is the final one you're going, right? And so I consider myself, I go out of my way to be thoughtful about the language I use, but I also recognize sometimes we are just looking for problems. And I'm honestly kind of disturbed that our city spent so long even talking about it. It's like, change the word, okay? Like, okay, whatever, like it doesn't matter, it's the title. I can't believe we've been talking about it now, and I'm talking about it. It's like, I disagree that's not even the history of the word. I just looked it up. It's teaching, there's actually a history of it. But if it's more welcoming that people use a different word, fine. I just don't think there needs to be a discussion. Just like, okay, implementation, good. Let's talk about the content of it, which is what actually affects.
Second the motion to move on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can move on from discussion of this. And I think there is totally, negative connotation about master. I mean, it literally pretty much does come from slavery.
It's not actually.
I mean,
but
it's can be connoted with that. And so,
lots of things can be connected with a lot of things.
but I think implementation is something that's, more neutral, obviously, and actually is what we're trying to do with this plan, which is actionable. Master plan just comes off of this saying, okay, this is just the overlying plan, but implementation is something that actually has an actionable word with it. And I think it's just a better word to use. And so that, and stakeholder, I was surprised about stakeholder, for example, but I think all of this stuff is just an evolving process for learning, unlearning as well.
Just one last comment is, I think the implementation is good. I just think the reason for what master might be connotated at, like we're gonna start thinking words right and left, it has a bad meaning. Stakeholders is kind of an overused term, but it really means who has a stake in this. As parties, doesn't have that same. So the reason for doing it, I think that could be a discussion between stakeholder part, but the reason for doing that is concerns as far as people might think word means when 90% of the other people, it's the basic connotation of just something. So that's implementation, I think is good as far as just the reason we got to it.
It always amazes me when someone uses the word for a really long time and all of a sudden is like, oh, I actually had a problem with it. To me, that says they didn't have a problem with it. They're just trying to follow what someone else has a problem. So
Can we?
I think.
Let's change the word.
So I think we can probably
change the
on
implementations.
2020 and big role in how we think about these things. We can, I think it's safe to move on.
Okay, sounds great. So first action, 1.1, this is basically making it a more actionable action. So, previously we didn't talk about when evaluations would be done. We're just saying annually we should look at evaluations. So pretty straightforward. Just trying to make sure that we can sort of track these things in the future and we know when we're going to be doing them and when it's expected to be done. The second one is just adding a word improvement. So just making it clear that this is related to transportation improvement projects. 1.1.3 is related to a new action, which is a annual collision monitoring report. So a new action, but again, just to support tracking and implementation, making sure that we're being transparent when with data, and just better supporting how we're thinking about collisions that happen throughout the city.
About that one, the interaction, that and the traffic calming plan, so it's like I know that's spurred on by speeding or collisions or something like that.
Yeah, they're related in a sort of adjacent way. So collisions would sort of support a traffic calming program that someone from the community is asking for. So if someone from the community says, "Hey, I'd really like something to be done here," collisions would be part of that, like analysis of thinking about what to do. So if there's a collision here, and the primary factor for that collision was like speeding, that would be another consideration versus like if it was something else. So yeah. And then the next three are related to Vision Zero. These are really minor updates, and it's mostly just to improve how it reads, reducing some redundancies. And the last part is about a biennial report. So that's just sort of getting more clear what the intention is with that.
So there's an interaction between the 1.13, the annual collision monitoring, and the Vision Zero.
Yeah.
Where in order to be effective in reducing the casualties and injuries, we need to know causes, we need to know whether these things are going to be impacted by any actions that we take. Should that be more explicit, linking those together, where the report is going to tell us enough information so that we can make effective actions?
Yeah, so like you're saying, what do we do with the data once we have it?
Yeah, so as I read through the Vision Zero aspects, there's a lot of that is, if somebody has an accident, it doesn't matter if they're, drunk in the night, or if, there's a really dangerous slick road that people die on when it rains. And those are very different causes that are going to be impacted differently by actions that we take. So tying those things together, maybe the report, and feeding that into the actions that we take for Vision Zero.
Yeah, we can do that. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Any other comments for this slide? Moving on, 1.3.1. So this is related to the traffic calming program. This is just pretty minor update, just making clear that reporting would be biennial, and sort of the result of that would be part of the transportation improvement program, which we do every year. After that, we have a new action. This is related to speed limit setting. Just sort of thinking about traffic calming and sort of establishing safer vehicle speeds. One action could be that we take a look at the speed limits that we do have and sort of think about the context and sort of what the overall priorities of the street are relative to how streets function throughout the city. So, yes.
You could finish your saying.
Okay, yeah.
That's what I was reading.
Sure. Yeah. So, I drove over here from City Hall, and one thing that I noticed as I was sort of thinking about my presentation was Newport, how there's like a school zone, right? And so during certain times of day, you're supposed to drive slower because there's children present. And that's sort of an example of like how the context and the speed limit are sort of related. That is like a pretty well-established thing that the state requires, is like the school zone. But that's just sort of an example of like ways that we can think about how the speed limits are set throughout the city. If we want to prioritize, access to, a facility like near someone's home, or if we want to really prioritize like throughput and getting goods from here to there. Just another sort of thing that we could look at is like how speed limits are set and if they're aligned with our greater goals.
So my question was, when I read this, it almost makes it sound like our current speed limit setting policies don't prioritize the safety of people. I'm just curious, do we not do that already?
Yeah, I would say that speed limits, so they're set, I think this was mentioned maybe at the last meeting, like we looked at 85th percentile speed, and like that sort of dictates You know, there's reduction factors you can add to that, but like it's really sort of hard and fast, like this is how people are driving right now. And then you can reduce it based on the context, but maybe there's like better ways to look at it. And other cities have started to do this in the area where like they have reduced, for instance, the speed limits in certain areas based on like the needs of the area and like what we're trying to achieve in that area. So yes.
Can the city change their own speed limits or do they have to have state approval?
It's a great question.
The city council can approve it now. In order to do it, it takes a traffic study, or there are certain types of streets where if the city had a policy, we could implement, but it all has to begin with the city council.
It's the city council's policy that we need this.
Well, I'm going off memory because it's been 6+ months since I read this part, but I believe if we wanted to set the speed to 20 miles an hour on certain residential streets, that the city council could adopt a policy for how to go about doing that, rather than take each of those to council. But if we wanted to isolate, I'll just say Northwest Gilman, we wanted to change the speed limit to whatever, we'd have to do a speed study and then have the council adopt the new speed limit.
You said like neighborhood streets as the example. I was just Googling, is basically where do traffic fatalities and pedestrians actually happen? Most AI response is not very good, so I'm not gonna trust it. Is that like his neighborhood streets where that's, because I guess I would have assumed it actually wouldn't be the neighborhood street. Maybe bad assumption. I would have assumed it would be places where people are be crossing more to get to a store, or rather than just like, I'm picturing like a cul-de-sac type neighborhood street. I guess I'm surprised that that would be where you would have the most impact to speed limits. I would expect it to be currently higher speed streets that would have fatalities happen, and therefore where a policy would happen.
Yeah, to be honest, there's not too many collisions that happen throughout the city, but we do have some. I don't know that we have enough to like really create like a cause and effect kind of situation. But each one is an individual incident. And I guess that's just part of the thinking of like speed limit setting is, you know, that could make the street more comfortable for biking, for instance. Like this is just an example that I thought of in the moment, but if the speed limit is 35 miles an hour and we want to have cyclists use the facility, maybe it makes sense to reduce the speed limit, because if you're riding your bike on a 35-mile-per-hour street, maybe that's not super comfortable. So there's other sort of things to think about, but I think it relates to our overarching goals for like the streets that we have relative to like the transportation element, but also within the parameters of what's possible, because speed limits are set through like traffic engineering. Great. I'll just keep moving on. The commute trip reduction plan is 2.1.1. This is basically summarizing previously stated items that were in the mobility master plan. There were just a couple here and there, but we're currently working on an action plan specific to the commute reduction plan. This is like a state requirement and it has specific things that we do. So this is just pointing, rather than being redundant with our actions, just say, okay, look at that plan and then implement it as it says.
Could you, in case other folks don't know the particulars, could you go through a little bit about CTR?
Sure. Yeah, so the commute trip reduction plan is for employers that have over 100 employees. and basically says, if you have this many employees, you should think about ways to reduce like commuters on the road. So examples of things that a CTR program could have is like, remote work for employees, or maybe instead of having your employees show up, like in a world where like a business is right next to a school, you wouldn't really want your employees to also be in that school traffic. It would just be like crazy for an intersection. So you could say, okay, we're going to start, employees will come to work like 30 minutes or a half hour or like an hour after school is let out. So these are just like all these ways that we can ensure that intersections and like the roads are functioning properly. If you can imagine if 100 employees all came in at once, that'd be like, depending on the context, that would be really crazy.
Only like 3 buses.
Yeah. So in some cities where, there's larger employers, they provide shuttles, like we've seen the Microsoft Connector, that's a CTR program type thing, where it picks up people that live in different areas. So we have a CTR program throughout the city, and we implement it, and the actions that we do would be part of that plan.
So since there's so much traffic impact in CTR, is that something we're reviewing on this board, the CTR plan? And is it scope for this discussion, like the details of the CTR plan? Or?
Yes, that is my plan. Yeah, because I'm the CTR coordinator. So I'm actually in the midst of writing a 4-year plan, which the state has never mandated before. So we're starting from scratch. And I'm in the midst of figuring out exactly what public engagement I need to be doing, because there's some legally required public engagement. So TAB is on that list of stops. Yeah.
So we pull a few elements of CTR, just the organization of it, into this master implementation plan. Sorry, not master, mobility implementation. I'll learn one of these things. Do we want to dig into more of those details? Like, do we want to pull out things like reducing length of commute by studying the impacts and proposing changes to things like zoning, or things that impact the ability?
Yeah. So that sort of spans beyond the reach of what the plan is for. It's really like we don't want to prevent someone from doing business here, but we do want to say within reason, like these are some legitimate things that you can do for your business that also have the mutual benefit of like reducing traffic. So we don't want to say like, okay, like you can't come and do business here because like we don't like the way that you are doing your business. But it could just be, well, your employees need a way to get to work, and like the state requires you to think about this, and you have a menu of options that you can choose from. So like pick the one that best fits your needs and your employees' needs.
And part of committed trip reduction is also CTRs. Like we provided showers. We build showers in our building so people could ride their bikes, secure bike area and shower so that they could actually ride a bike. So that's part of getting people out, providing alternate modes, whether it's the timing of the day. And I think it'd be hard to, an interesting comment, how you could take traffic. Versus just ride a bike and take a shower, take them off the road, had it all implemented.
Yeah, I was thinking about like the smart growth aspects where, if you're combining the zoning, residential, commercial, you're going to naturally reduce some of the commute times from that, or commute distances. And so if those aspects should show up in this plan or not, I didn't really see them in there, but it seems like that could be relevant.
That's also beyond the scope of CTR. So the way the CTR law works is the term is good faith efforts. We have to work with these companies, these work sites that have over 100 employees, and we have to make contact with them. They're required to survey their employees every 2 years. We're required to get a program report from them. That's about it. There's no actual like threshold. You must reduce X by every 2 years. It's more just the tracking and working with me to see what kind of things they can do, but if they choose not to, we can't go after them per se, but we can talk to them, which, you know, that's for better or for worse.
How successful does that be?
It's relatively successful. Even just raising awareness, it goes a long way. So yeah, I have good working relationships with those companies.
There's some motivation built in for employees there, like their employees want shorter commutes or more efficient commutes. This is one way to achieve it.
How many work sites in Issaquah have more?
We have 8 at the moment. Yeah, our largest is Costco with 1,700 employees, and they have a really high in-office requirement. So traffic you see is a large part of them. Yeah. And parking garage. So anyway.
But we don't want to interrupt their economic activity because then we're going to hurt the city far, far more than making someone happy because they got extra car on the road. So I think it's good. I think encouraging them, finding guidance, meeting with them, I think those are all really positive.
Yeah, we just as an anecdote, then I'll keep moving. We did a bike to work day event at Costco 2 years ago. So we bring it to them and like we're doing what we can. But again, like Costco, the way that they've structured their business, it just doesn't work the same way that like we might. I think we could have a mutual benefit, but like we're just continuing those conversations, and we certainly don't want to like have them stop what they're doing. So yeah. So this is just going back to what we're talking about, CTR program. We have an action plan that we're developing. And then the second one is related to transportation management plans. These are for private development. Sometimes a development comes in and, for instance, they might bring a lot of trips. So let's take, for example, an apartment building that has 200 units. If that comes into central Issaquah, it might trigger some improvements that might be needed. So one way to reduce the burden of a development coming in is to say, okay, well, you can reduce how many people are likely going to pass through an intersection by managing it in these ways. And there's we currently do this, so it's not really a new thing, but I just have relocated it here. And it's just something that is very successful in making sure that the transportation network continues to operate efficiently.
An example, wasn't that done with Costco corporate, like when they moved their headquarters, wasn't there a bunch of like renovation and like making that area more robust transportation wise?
Yeah, that's related. So they there's development agreements, which is basically you have the area that you're going to develop, and as a condition of getting the ability to build it, we say, okay, well, you actually need a road because there's going to be a lot of trips coming here, lots of people getting to work, so we need a new road to help you, but also to make sure that the other roads that are existing aren't like completely congested and not useful anymore. Cool. So continuing on, commuter production. So there's 2 new actions related to commuter production and transportation demand management. These are just, they're really inclusive of previously listed actions, but so the first one is ensuring that the program is compliant with state requirements. So that's sort of the reason why we have the CTR program. And then the other one is making sure to collaborate and like sort of sharing learnings and, acknowledging that other cities have commuter production plans and if there's ways to improve efficiencies and effectiveness there.
Super minor, but it looks like TDM, that's the first time they use that acronym, so.
Okay, yeah, sure. And And then 2.3.1, incorporating climate considerations into infrastructure evaluation and prioritization. This is something that I believe that TAB looked at in the previous transportation improvement plan process. It's just, incorporating climate into how we plan and like build projects.
Do you want to call out then the CIP instead of just saying climate? I don't know. I mean, it seems like climate might just be like, depending on how much you're gonna use this document to be like, it says this, I must now do this, and you know, you have a plan for how to address climate, so.
Yeah, we could do that. So you're saying within that phrase, capital improvement plan instead of just saying infrastructure generally? Is that?
Oh, no, I meant.
It's a climate action.
Climate action.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, sorry, wrong. Yeah, just calling out our, the city has that, so.
What else? I think that's good.
Yeah. I was gonna say that it does seem a little bit vague, like incorporating climate considerations is very, very vague. That doesn't actually tell me anything about what is going to happen, and having a reference of like, we don't have space for that in this document. There's another document that says what we're going to do. That is very good.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, the last one on this slide is evaluating critical needs for alternative transportation network projects. So this is a requirement that we have, but we have a comprehensive emergency management plan. And so one of the things that we're doing currently is we're considering if there's a wildfire in the city, like sort of how that might play out and things we can do to like better plan for that. So that's sort of related to this is looking to see if there's other transportation network projects that could support evacuation quicker in like,
Or like alternative transportation doesn't mean like bus and stuff like that.
It could be, it could be that. It could be like if there's a, if you lived in the mountains, if there was like a fire access road that could be opened up, like if
for like firefighting.
right. So if that could be opened up and potentially used as for anybody, if you lived on the top of the mountain and you could use that to get out, that would be like a quicker. So alternative can mean many things, but it could be like coordinating with King County Metro, like to get buses like rushed over here, or it could, just all these other ways.
Is this 2 I guess it'll be on the next slide for the emergency transportation fire network.
Yes. Yeah. So just to sort of stop here, I think I received a couple comments here, but any other last comments for this?
So that's way in here. I like hate that we have to do this. That's just kind of where like things are, right? Like it's very real reality that as like things get drier and drier. And I know that this has been, I've just seen it in like, Highlands Facebook group, things like that. Of like the big concerns about the higher up you go the hill in the mountains, that like kind of the more limited your like exit route is. And
Sure.
so I love seeing this.
Yeah, very, very important and very timely, right?
Assuming there's already plans for other sorts of disasters. Like I think probably wildfire is the most likely. We also live in an earthquake, so.
Yeah, the document, the comprehensive emergency management plan, it talks about generally the things that we would do, the actions that we would take. But actively, we are looking specifically at a wildfire event. I don't really work in the space of like emergency management, but I do know that like there's a desire to just prepare generally, and like yes, fires are like the most likely in this area.
So tell us landslides.
Tell us, mountain for house out there.
That's the great.
I know.
Any other thoughts on my previous slide?
So moving on, 2.3.3, this is that emergency transportation provider network. This is something that we don't currently do, but we are planning on joining. It's basically like a mutual aid situation with transportation providers. And this would just, yeah, be like coordinating buses or like if there's, you know, vans that are available, this could be just like other cities helping the city that's currently affected by something. So kind of scary to think about, but like we do need to be thinking about, you know, how we support others in a like extreme weather event or an emergency. So this is not something that I typically dwell on too much, but we do need to be thinking about this. And there's a plan that we update every 5 years. It's sort of related to that.
Just picturing like Metro Flex to the rescue.
You know, it unfortunately it could happen. So yeah. Great. So this next set of 4, these are all brand new. The first one's about collecting data. And then the second one's about using that data for maps. And then partnering with federal agencies, state and local emergency management teams. And then that 4th one is related to that study I was talking about. So this is specific to wildfires. But yeah, we certainly want to be thinking about ways that we can adequately evacuate in the event that there's a hazardous event. We want to be thinking about ways that we can take care of that and like have good strategy for that.
That's all good.
Do we, similar to the other ones, for the 2.4, would it be helpful for us to specify like a timing for doing these exercises? Instead of just saying, we'll exercise them sometimes. It'd be helpful to do like, you know, we'll do like a mock exercise like every year or like every other year of these situations.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm not sure when this will occur. I just don't work in this world. So I can forward the feedback, but yeah, if you want to let me know what you think about that and like sort of how to make, you're basically saying like, how do I make this more actionable and like, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just like similar to the other ones, right?
Yeah.
Say, like, adding the clarifications, how often you do the reporting and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Similar to those sort of situations. When it comes to, doing mock exercises or tactics of
Okay.
evaluation, how often should we do it? So whether it's like every other year, like a big regional practice simulation.
Yeah.
This is how we'll get all the buses and all that to one area and evacuate everyone out.
So I'll make a note to look into like how often this should realistically be done. Is that fair?
I'll have a comment.
Yeah.
Or I think
For 2.4.1 and 2, what maps exactly is it referencing?
So these are requirements that we have so that the map is related to critical areas and mapping where like sea level rises and like flood risk. And there's like environmental maps that show like where certain areas of the city are more likely to be affected by certain things. Yeah.
yeah, mapping.
Oh,
Yeah. Shows everything from July 3rd to.
Right.
My comment is kind of tying on what Julian was saying as far as should be at some point base simulation or modeling of an evacuation at some point, and then updated whether it's every couple of years or every time any major new development happens, or probably to know like 5 years down the road is simulated again, but that same evacuation around option.
I'll jump in there just a little bit, which is, even if you don't put, have to do it every 2 years in this plan, you could phrase it differently. It's phrased as in, do it once, right? And if this is a 20-year plan, that's like once in 20 years. But, conduct an evacuation time estimate, or could be maintain time estimates for evacuation. Maintain accurate time estimates, or instead of update maps, could be maintain maps, right? Instead of supporting a map of regional hazards, support mapping regional hazards. So a little bit different phrasing.
Sure.
And then it could for the specific time frame to whatever document is appropriate.
Yeah, makes sense.
So I almost think that it might be best across all of the ones that there's some time frame called out. My question was really going to be, although after hearing that, I think that's the best way to handle it. My question was going to be, writing annually, does that create some future budgetary commitment, or is this just a guiding policy document? Thus, it doesn't, right? Because what I don't want to do is us just for discussion, and then it's, look, it report's $500,000, right? It's like, oh, don't do that, right? So one, does this actually create a commitment? If, we suggest language and then someone doesn't read that exact cell and doesn't check the budget for it and then approves it. And two, is it possible to just have some language that doesn't nail down exactly the frequency so that it doesn't put us in that position regardless of how much is commitment?
Yeah, these are actions. So there will be, assuming that council approves this, this will be sort of things that we need to do every year, if that's what it says, or every 2 years. So yeah, it is a commitment.
Well, I'm gonna say, to answer the question directly, it is not a budget commitment because only council can do that through the budgeting process. And so we may tell, now this is not what we want to do, but we could tell the community we're going to report this every year. But then council doesn't authorize funds in the budget, then we just can't do it.
So they could look at it and go, you said biannually, but the quote we got is can't afford it this year, we're gonna do it next year. That would be fine.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, so moving on to 2.5, just some minor revisions for the first. Yes.
So why do we say people with and then folks with? Shouldn't it be either folks with for both or people with for both?
Sure, yeah.
I don't. When you talk about words that are possible, I've heard people claim folks does, so people maybe just safest.
Okay, yeah, sounds good.
I actually thought users would be a reasonable term there, but maybe that's because I'm too much of a geek.
Yeah, as wordsmithing happens, everybody has an opinion on it, which I appreciate. So I'm happy to hear all these opinions. We also heard comments that there's not enough emphasis on the people, so users might remove the human aspect. So yeah, all these things, I'm happy to hear all that and just sort of.
Dogs could use the trails too.
Dogs are people.
Issaquah.
But for people versus folks, folks sounds like too. I feel like it's
I feel like
generic.
I feel like people sounds much
Which was people.
sounds more professional.
Yeah, I agree.
Or yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And I'll look for any reference to folks, and I'll swap it with people. So that's that first two. The next one is updating the ADA transition plan. So this was brought to the board, I think was it March? Yeah, so the city has a Americans with Disability Act, which I believe was 1990, transition plan. And that basically says, any city facilities, and this is inclusive of like crosswalks with curb ramps, we need to, acknowledging that there's a lot of things out here that are not accessible to people with limited mobility, we need to plan to swap that out and like show that we have a way to take care of these over time. So this is a state requirement. Actually, it's a federal requirement, and we are required to do it every 5 years. So this is just sort of saying we should do this. Next, we have park systems. So the first one is just some minor revisions to improve sentence flow. The second one is a new policy. The city has trail design standards that we should update. We haven't updated them in a long time. So this is just saying we should do that to promote different pavement types and sort of help with water quality impact and maintenance. So that there are like economic reasons why you would want to do it, because it's easier to clean up and it like is more permeable. But it also helps with like water quality and like the water table and like just cleaning up from runoff. So there's different pavement types that can help with that. We can just update the trail standards to reflect the newest like technology. So like
I really like this. I almost wonder whether water quality is not broad enough. If we want to impact the environment or something to, is there more than just water? I'm fine with it as is, so I'm not like, we really need to update it. But I don't know if there's more than just water we want.
I think things beyond water would be covered by other regulations.
Okay. But I'm good with it. I think it's great.
the next two are just minor revisions, just to improve sentence flow.
I have a question about the 3.3, the other one. How come we're taking out like, we're not calling out the green necklace specifically, that change name to it?
Yeah, great question. So the name has changed, or it will change as part of the parks plan. So we're now calling it Creeks to Peaks. Yeah. So I think there's a draft online. It's not like I'm saying anything out of turn, but that is the latest. So green necklace out, Creeks to Peaks in. Yeah.
Creeks to Peaks.
Yeah. So this whole strikeout is really just like making sure that that pointer, the reference to that document is consistent. Okay, so now we're on 2.6.4. Another minor revision, just improving sentence flow, adding some clarity. Any other comments for this slide?
So for this whole section, one of the ways in the document is factored overall is that we've got these elements of creating access to things like trails and parks. And then we've got things like, we've got sections on modes of transportation. So non-motorized, transit, et cetera. And those are sort of in separate sections here, but we pull a lot of that into explicitly this section on 2.6, which I think is fine. But we also kind of leave out emphasis on transit. And kind of there's a little bit of dissonance here for me where, we explicitly call out the non-motorized access. We don't explicitly call out transit here as access to it. Is there a reason for that? Are we missing something?
So just so I understand, so in policy 2.6, that area, you're wondering how we can incorporate like access to transit via trails?
Yeah, for the same reasons that we call out specifically creating and activating non-motorized connections. For example.
Yeah.
Should we, in the same spirit, call out creating transit connections?
Yeah, I do think it's covered elsewhere in the document, but I can see if there's a logical way to like fit that in to this. Yeah.
just looking at the King County shuttle program. to
Yeah.
Trails.
Yeah, it's related to the Trailhead Direct kind of thing. Yeah, okay. I've seen it now. Okay, cool.
Especially since they implemented it, took it away and then gave it back to us this year.
It is such a seasonal offering that sometimes we forget about it. So yeah, that was good comments. Okay.
But, you know, I think it is a tremendous service, especially since overcrowding at trailheads is a serious issue. So,
Yeah, and there are many possible others, right? That's not the only potential implementation.
Great, okay. Lost my train of thought here. Okay, so I think we were done with this section, right? And then we're on to, okay. So 3.1.1, some minor updates, just updating the figures. Say if you read that far through the mobility master plan, you'll see that some of the figured numbers were changed and the appendices were updated. 3.1.2 is a new action. This is related to a future discussion we're going to have with this board related to transportation concurrency. So this is related to a multimodal concurrency action in which we would develop sort of performance metrics for the phrase all ages and abilities facilities, which is also related to complete streets. So this is basically saying as we do concurrency, take a look at this, which we plan to do this year and next year. 3 is just some minor updates. This is really just showing like we do this action via the neighborhood planning process, which is specifying how this is implemented. The 5th one is updating the street standards so this is a new action. This is something that we currently do is updating the street standards. We updated just for context, the street standards is the engineering and design guidance for how we build roads. And so not only is this a new action for the mobility master plan, but mobility implementation plan, we're specifically saying every 3 years at a minimum, we should be updating it just so that we're keeping it fresh, making sure that the latest engineering guidance is how we build our roads.
Should we, is that not, I know it's like connected to a specific process. Is that on time? Like, is that like it occurs every, going back to what we did? Let's do it, suggesting, like, putting the cadence in there.
Sure. So specifically, we're talking about 3.1.3, which is the neighborhood planning process
Yeah,
one.
is that?
Yeah. So yeah, we're starting that off, I believe, next year. And the goal is to do a neighborhood every year.
Okay.
That's just sort of what.
It is like.
Yeah. So it is. Yeah, it is like time bound, but it's not specified. So these sorts of projects, in order to do it right, it could like span more than a year. So it's kind of hard to like put a timestamp on it because yeah. So.
What's the relationship between street standards and complete streets?
Yeah, so complete streets is a policy that we have, which says design your roads to accommodate all users and abilities. The street standards is like it is like the engineering details. There's a snapshot of a typical road and sort of what that should look like. So they are related, but the street standards is like literally like the guidance that an engineer would hand off to the next engineer. Whereas the policy of complete streets is more of it's a framework of thinking, which then feeds into how we design the roads.
Okay, does complete streets feed into other things like how we design networks of roads more than just
It does. And yeah, so the way that the mobility master plan is laid out is we have a layered network approach where we say buses will go on this road. We don't want a bus going through a neighborhood, but we have it over here because that makes sense for like the way that the road was designed. We have a bike route that goes over here. So you're not having a bus and like large cars going through certain streets, but you accommodate those on other streets that are adjacent to it. So you're able to get east, east, west, north, south, using different roads in the network. They just may not be on that same road.
Okay, so for 3.1.5 street standards updates, one of the things I think might be missing here, potentially we can talk about this, is climate impact. So given that the paving of the city, the percentage of the city that's paved is a huge impact on a lot of the climate initiatives, should we call that out explicitly here? So we call out multimodal goals, we don't call out climate action plan goals. So, yeah, so street standards would be things like how wide do we make the street? You make a street wider and paving more of the city.
All
So
right.
there's a direct relationship between the street standards that we pick.
So yeah, just to clarify, so you're saying like, look at the materials that we use to build roads, or like, I guess.
Matter that complete streets ties into that. Complete street, let's say, you don't need necessarily 24-foot wide street. You could do 2 11-foot lanes. That would play as far as making it a little bit more friendly for less street, more sidewalk, so you have less pavement.
Yeah, I think in terms of like street standards, that would include things potentially like leaving room for trees, preserving existing trees, yeah, potentially fold those into street standards, and those are directly.
So, yeah.
I'd say that is in the street standards. So I don't know, but we're also gonna have a conversation about it coming up as future tab item. I would lean towards not going down that rabbit hole with this update of the mobility implementation plan. But I just feel like if we were to go down that rabbit hole, that would take up more time than we have for the MIP. And we do have an upcoming discussion on.
And I might add, with these streets in the past, still working with one very systematically. These streets just think of a vision, the design manual of how you're gonna build it. Yeah, that'd be right. The vision from the streets is really taken from how streets were designed in the 50s, 60s, where it's like massive roads to move like 20-foot long by 10-foot wide cars, to now like totally screwed up the community side. You're back and you can have like pedestrians and bikes and everything in that street. Just all the complete streets is kind of how to have that vision, that section of road, and then the design. Support the weight of the truck.
Yeah, so the street standards design manual. Yeah.
So you were, close on it, so you were thinking about the items for this,
Yeah, 3.1.5.
and you want to add in climate goals as well, multiple.
Yeah, in alignment with the city's multimodal goals and action plan goals.
I think something generic like that would work. I didn't want to get into details of
Right.
things that we'll have discussions about.
I'm with you on that.
Okay, that's great. So now 3.2, including equity in the evaluation of needs and priorities of new and existing infrastructure. So this is something that we currently do as part of the transportation improvement plan program. That Tab has looked at, so we sort of include that as to our project list that is brought forth. So it's just sort of memorializing that, and then just sort of promotes our equity goals throughout the city. Complete Streets is the next one. So just a really minor update, changing the name from MMP to MIP. And then 3.4.1 is something that I brought to this tab like so long ago, a year and a half ago. So this is just a new action. This was developed as part of the transit study. So this is continuing that conversation on bike and scooter share programs and developing one that's tailored to the needs of the community.
Looking forward to the city spending millions of dollars on replacing bikes that get stolen and we don't police it, scattered all over the side of the road. It's gonna be pretty good future.
There's different ways to develop the program where the city has more or less skin in the game. So that'll be part of that conversation as well.
If it's worth having, then there should be a business that's willing to fund it. It shouldn't take the city funding. So studying it, I'm fine. I should say that.
So moving on, 3.4.2. This was mentioned as part of the transit study process. So I believe this was brought up by a member of the council. This was one example of another sort of transportation alternative is looking at electric bicycle library programs. And so just looking into this and seeing if this is an option that the city would like to pursue. Similar wording as like the bike and scooter share program, just looking into it.
So could you elaborate what the electric bicycle library programs?
Yeah, so it could be that an entity purchases e-bikes and then it's to promote e-bike usage. It could be like, use this for a week. And if you like it, then like, okay, give it back, but you should think about getting an e-bike because it was useful to you. So it's just like a way to promote alternative modes. And I know like in many of our hillier neighborhoods, having an e-bike would be really successful. Mostly for getting up, it's difficult to ride just a typical bike up the road. So like an e-bike could help with that.
So the like library thing isn't like a line bike kind of thing where you like scan it on your phone and write it.
No, yeah. So that would be the first one, which is like the scooter share program, but it's similar in that it's, you know, whatever the terms of the program could be, it could be like, you can use this for like the week, but then like, yeah. So this would, it's kind of hard to say like what it would entail because we haven't dug into it, but it could be that the city, you know, owns 3 bicycles that we lent out and the expectation is that you give it back. But it's like on a trial basis so that you can see what it was like to own an e-bike for a week.
So then in doing this, would they like study doing a bike share program and then study doing the bicycle library program and then decide which one they want to do, or?
Could be, yeah. Yeah, or they could be separate. Yeah.
Okay, all right, that makes sense.
Really include helmets. We just don't have that. We have to sign a waiver. We don't have that.
These are all details that, yeah. So moving on, 3.4.3. This was another thing that was brought up. So the city currently has e-bikes as part of our municipal fleet. So this is sort of saying we will continue doing that. E-bikes have been really successful, specifically with the park staff. There's lots of trails that they can ride it on. They've also been used for like other visits that you need to do. So inspections could be done on a bike if it's like nearby. You don't need to like bring a bunch of gear. So there's ways that you can use other vehicles that are like less maintenance heavy. It's just like a better use of like city funds, and they can be they could be used in a pretty good manner. So this is just saying, continue doing that. It's been successful.
That probably would have been nice to get here from City Hall today.
Yeah, we only have a couple. Yeah, we could probably explore.
Again, going back to like the actionable, the timeline issue, obviously this is not commitments in any sense, but you know, to include some language, even as, you know, future council. Or someone interpreting this language in the future, I think, would be pretty, not very strong, so perhaps something about instrumental cities, fleets, that's a little tiny 2 bike cart, but something where staff are able to consistently, where there's a bike available for the staff to use.
Another thing with that you could do is like partner with like local bike shops and stuff and to see if you could get good discounts for staff to purchase their own e-bikes. That could work well too.
I'm gonna push back on that one because, well, I would love that. As a public employee, I can't do that.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
That'd be great. But I can't, like, we can't be getting benefits from our.
Oh, that makes
role as
sense.
being public
If
employees.
the city wanted to do something like that, the city could provide a benefit to city employees to get a credit to buying a e-bike or something.
Oh,
That's how I would have to.
Yeah. I like that idea though. That sounds great. Yeah, so in that's really like, in that like instance, for example, that could be like a CTR program thing because the city itself is a large employer. So maybe the way that it reduces its like traffic load is that they provide like e-bike credits or something so that, you know, all these things feed into it, but yeah, it's good thought though. Yeah.
So just going back to the language of I think investing, I think that's great. I think that the city should look at the use cases and invest for the use cases. I don't think we should describe as an instrumental part of the fleet or anything like that, because that's defining the vehicles they have based on the vehicles you want them to have, not based on the use cases. And if it's like there's more use cases for them, great. Like I think they're more cost effective than cars for the city, so go to get more. But if they're not use cases, so we shouldn't define a fleet size. We should say, you know, heading in that, investing. In I think the language is good.
Is there a way to combine cities and bicycle, like e-bike fleet with the like general bike library? Or is that's like a decision?
Yeah, I like that thought though, like, it's almost related to policies we have about like, electric vehicle charging facilities and like sort of if other people can use it when it's not being used. So yeah, that's a policy question that will probably be addressed as we go into that e-bike program. But yeah, these are good thoughts. Yeah.
Does anyone else have any thoughts about the language in terms of instrumental versus leaving it out or timelines?
I would like to nudge more, but don't want to prescribe a specific set. Or we could put it in there, providing that it's, what was your phrase, like a use case?
I mean, I guess what does that do with it? What does that do more than say invest in?
I think what I would suggest is if you were going to add any kind of extra emphasis, you say something like in order to make transportation, I'm trying to say like, say something about like how it affects the cost effectiveness / like carbon emissions of the city, like in order to reduce carbon emissions or reduce the cost of transporting employees, like you could put a reason. If I don't know if that's appropriate for the document, but
Yeah, we can throw the intent there.
yeah, throw an intent like this. There's these specific things we're trying to achieve with this goal to make it more clear to people why you want to.
Yeah, it sounds good.
The overall section is, you know, basically about researching
these options. So it's pretty clear from that.
Seems like the closure here is just, I guess, leave it as is with adding some motivations for if you're happy with that.
Okay. 3.5.1, this is pointing to the light rail planning guide that the city adopted in March. And there's a whole list of actions that the city will be taking as we plan for light rail. So rather than copying and pasting, it just makes more sense to just point to that guide. This document is something that we're going to update every year over the next 3 years, just to make sure that our assumptions are correct. So it'll sort of live elsewhere, but this is pointing to that. The next one is just, reviewing, maintaining it, regularly updating it. This is, we don't have a specific time frame in here, but internally it is an annual thing. And then beyond that, once we've talked to Sound Transit, like every 2 years, once things are really moving. So that's those two.
The only comment I have is regular updating. I kind of give it to me as far as when it makes sense to update it, but I don't know if it's a good word as far as biannually.
Yeah, to phrase it correctly would be every year between now and when Sound Transit approaches us, and then every 2 years after. And that doesn't really flow very well, but I'll try to figure out a way. It's like 2 sentences to say that.
And coordination what's happening.
Yeah. I'll find out a way to do this in a way that makes sense. The other issue is like, it really is about the cadence, right? Yeah. So, okay. I'm missing something in the slide deck. There's also 3.6.1, so that's unfortunately not in this list, but I'll just say this. It was relocated from a previous MMP 6.1. So this is developing safe and comfortable walking like facilities in the central Issaquah area, and supporting I-90 crossing. So this is just, it's not new, but it's just was relocated from one spot to another.
What's the light rail supposed to be?
We don't know yet. Yeah.
You're gonna start paying taxes on it there.
So we know that it's going to be in central Issaquah, which is just a neighborhood that's basically like, the state park to the north, and then Newport to the south. And then it's basically, it's a little bit more west of I-90 or SR 900.
So near here, or
So it'll be north of here, but yes, roughly, yeah.
So like around where the existing transit center is.
It could be that, it could be further north, it could be east or west. Yeah, there, I have a map that I showed in the previous tab meeting, but there's like a green block.
Yes.
That's all we know at this point.
I
Yeah,
think somewhere just east of 90th,
Uh-huh.
or just east of Front Street.
Oh,
In general.
yeah. So next year, we're gonna start looking into potential options for like where the station could go. And we're gonna come up with our best approach for like what the community wants. And then we're gonna give that to Sound Transit, and they're gonna do their own study. But we're gonna look at a bunch of options, and then we're gonna hopefully come together and agree upon one location. And that's gonna be our preferred location that they run with. Yeah.
60 years old.
That's it, pay for Unlimited buses.
Oh, that's all.
All right, 4.1.3,
I think the number got broken there
okay,
on
Locker fund.
it seems like an office thing where it continues the numbering instead of restarting.
yeah,
At least because when I go to page 9, it goes 3, 4, and then 5, 6 on the next one. I think it just, yeah, it's just a it's a classic, yeah. Everyone would call it that. You changed it and you type something and then it changes it back for you.
yeah, okay. So we'll update that. Okay, so 4.1.3. Yeah, unfortunately, just unavoidable. So this one is a new action determining critical needs for the pedestrian network to support multimodal access to different locations.
But that doesn't make sense. Why would you determine critical needs of the pedestrian network to support multimodal access? So pedestrian network, isn't it pedestrian access?
It is, but it's also, you know, access to buses or it's access to where you're parked, where you're, you know,
Okay.
yeah. Fourth one is implementing small scale capital projects. So this would just be spot treatments. So like, for instance, if there's a break in the sidewalk and we could easily connect it, very small projects. Typically how this would be handled is we lump a bunch of small projects and we put that out to bid and then have one big project of 5 small projects. So this would just be implemented via the transportation improvement program.
It would work similar to a bunch of the sidewalk improvements we were seeing this summer.
Right, yeah, exactly, yep. Cool, so moving on to bicycles. So 5.1.5, this is just the really, you know, it's related to the transportation network is just for bicycles. So determining the critical needs of the bike network to support access to transit. So this was something that was brought up through the transit study. It's just making sure that the bike network is connecting to where transit stations are. Next one is a project that we have in the capital improvement project, reducing and resolving conflicts between buses and bike lanes. This is something that we realized as we were studying transit that buses are currently parked in bike lanes to pick up people. So making sure that we can resolve those. We have some projects that are in the capital improvement program, and it's just make sure that the bike lane is no longer like part of where the bus is picking up.
I
So
hope we're being thoughtful about that because I've seen some other cities do. Sometimes they manage to like cease all traffic flow and they're like, we solved it. You see the bus no longer stops in that because they stop in the middle of traffic. And then the bike lane is just it's pretty bad.
yeah, the projects that I'm thinking of are on major roads where there's multiple lanes that other people could use. So there's room for that. And we have a specific design. I think it's called a bus boarding island for some of the options where it like raises pedestrians out of the bike lane. And then there's also like an option for bikes to get through. So it accomplishes many goals, and there's also a way to like drive around it.
Even though it's a lot in Seattle, for example,
Yeah, there's some examples in Seattle. Yeah.
in Capitol Hill, Broadway.
Yeah, next to the Roosevelt station as well, there's one.
One of the things that's come up in this board in the past has been safety of e-bikes. So e-bikes are pretty new. We're still kind of figuring out how they fit with everything. They're mostly cordoned off into the section of bicycling in terms of how the city thinks about them. But in terms of, you know, speeds and all of that, some of that is state regulated. it might make sense for us to think about, how do we think about safety of e-bikes on the bike network specifically?
Yeah, this topic has been brought up a couple times, like about a year ago. It's about like, is it a bike or is it like,
Motorcycle.
yeah.
Yeah, I was about to say, because I know there's this thing called Surons. I don't know if you've heard of them. They're basically like electric dirt bikes, and then everyone says they're mountain bikes, even though they're really not, at least from my perspective. So I don't know if like there's probably a similar problem with e-bikes where there's like, the different like, well, there's class 1, which is just pedal assist, and class 2 and 3 we have throttles.
Right.
So I wonder something like defining of what is an e-bike that's okay to use on the bicycle network could be useful.
That might be more of a state issue though.
Yeah,
It's a state issue, but there are elements of enforcement, there's elements of signage.
Yeah.
education, Just generally studying whether it's safe for.
But that's something the city should consider it.
I would throw in another consideration in terms of like balancing the conversation. It's like, there's also a approach which goes a little bit too far in this. So looking at Nagana, for example, which is really overregulating use of e-bikes within their borders. So just think about that balance. And
Well,
that
this, what are they doing? What they're doing that it's over.
I believe that they have
E-bikes completely.
e-bikes, and that is a very popular, that one road through Medina is a very popular route, going across the 520 trail. So,
I think one of the reasons people get to that point where they decide to ban e-bikes is because it's sort of Wild West and you get people on, these dirt bikes that can go 40 miles an hour. If that's totally unregulated, then you get kind of the pendulum swing. So finding the good compromise is pretty important.
I think there are some trails in Issaquah that have speed limits on the bike. I'm thinking of the one that runs along Lake Sammamish out to Maryville. That one, I believe that there's always a speed limit on that trail.
15. Well,
Yeah, and so that is one way to resolve that issue. I think that could, especially if that's becoming an issue, setting a speed limit on the trail and expecting people to follow it. If people aren't, you do traffic calming as you would anywhere else, right?
Yeah, so I think specifically because we have more e-bikes and because there are these new situations where people might be exceeding the speed limit, that's never been enforced before.
Yeah, I think, it's definitely a consideration.
Calling that as a separate sub-goal under bicycling makes sense.
Could you frame it as in order to not curbing away from right? ban, as like encouraging the use of e-bikes instead of like using traffic, like climate impacts while also maintaining this safe.
Encouraging the safe use of e-bikes on the bike network, right?
Yeah, or studying new concerns that pop up with the use of e-bikes.
Yeah.
While encouraging their use. Something like that.
I'm gonna chew on this idea a little bit more, because this is an action plan, so I want to make sure that we can measure how we would take care of this. And it is like a broader issue. It could be like a state issue. So I'm gonna make a note of this, but I'm gonna think about like realistic ways that we could tackle this and see what we do with that.
I think in what you're saying was classifications. E-bike started off with helping someone pedal the bike, be able to go speed, and now it's like, wow, some really cool things with it. And now when you've got some power bikes, and so how do you regulate one that's really assisting somebody to use the bicycle like a bicycle, where you can run somewhere versus somebody using it much more. And because there's a guy that lives down there, there's a trail by our house, and he comes by going like 20 miles an hour on on the gravel trail for dogs and everything. It's on the paper.
I would be hesitant to put anything in here that talks about specific e-bike limitations because we don't know how it's going to develop like on our trails. I'm not suggesting this be in the plan, but how you deal with that is the speed limit on the trail, right? It's like at some point, if you're going 30 miles on a bike, you probably shouldn't be on the same trail as someone walking. Hey, go to the velodrome. But it was interesting. So a little bit I did find on Medina. It seemed like they were, I think some of the parks you're thinking of are not actually city parks. They're owned by the state, so it wouldn't have anything to do with Medina puts in place. But they want them off their trails, their dirt trails. These they're getting, they're so much heavier and they're getting damage on them. That's why they.
I'm just gonna be cognizant of how much time we have together, so these are all good thoughts. I'm gonna look into this a little bit more, but I think for the sake of time, I'm just gonna keep cruising through. I think we've finished this slide deck, right? We're good. Oh, sorry, last one. Proactively resolve, yeah, conflicts between buses and bike lanes. Yep, talked about that. Okay. So moving on to 6.1, we have a new, these are all related to the transit study that we did. Engaging with discussions with Puget Sound Regional Council and other public transit providers to ensure that there's forward compatibility with the future high capacity transit expansion. So this is just saying, you know, take a leadership role in regional public transit planning.
Specific, like, to it, or there's something, or is it, there's something more specific that's already happening to call out more specifically?
Yeah, so the city staff, we go to lots of these sort of meetings that transit agencies and Puget Sound Regional Council are at. So this is something that we just like are constantly already doing. But again, the light rail planning guide does talk about like when we need to ramp up sort of that effort. So it's sort of saying continue as we are currently doing, but then like another action will also flow into that and say you should start developing those relationships and making sure that you're more involved as we approach those discussions with light rail. Yeah.
Just to comment, the bus in the Puget Sound Transit Express bus, that bay, that's Metro bus, and that's not. No,
It's a bigger number.
the figure number. It's on page.
Sorry, I don't think I caught what was mentioned. Yeah.
Page 46 of 394.
Could you mention again?
Oh, yeah, there's a picture of a Metro bus at a bus stop. And the caption below says Sound Transit Express Bus 556 at Bay 6.
Okay, all right.
There actually is a picture of that up above, so there's two pictures there.
It's the opposite, it might be true.
Oh, interesting.
Where
Yeah,
Sound transit buses could actually be a Metro bus.
it could have been. So this document is in track changes. So I think what probably happened is that like the actual version is correct, but maybe that photo was, yeah.
Yeah,
So,
there's a photo above a Sound Transit bus and then a Metro bus and the caption.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I'll fix that. Yeah, thanks for flagging that though.
Got it. Thank you. Okay.
Okay, so 6.1.1. Talked about that. Next is partnering with other jurisdictions in King County to coordinate regional transit improvements. This is something that we already do really, but yeah, it's again, taking that leadership role with public transit planning. 6.21. Investing in capital improvement projects that develop appropriate street crossings, complete bike and pedestrian network gaps, and traffic calming to promote equitable and sustainable access to transit service. So these are all reflected in the capital improvement and transportation improvement project development. These projects go through tab. 6.41, supporting, yes.
So I think that should be 6.3 and then 6.4. 6.2, 6.4,
These are only,
or were we just,
you could be right, but this document is just reflecting things that have changed. So I think
So
maybe
might just be
6.3
there, okay.
has not changed.
so the other thing is, I don't think we should call out Metroflex specifically. We don't know, could be that King County Metro comes out with a new program that's better and they roll Metroflex into it and we're like, oh wait, our plan says we gotta support this.
Okay.
I think the first mile, last mile solutions covers the intent and doesn't pigeonhole us into something that could just change for the better and we're missing out on it because we described a specific program. So I like the intent of it, I just don't want to name a specific thing that change.
Do we want to sustain the rest of, just like the entire sentence, and so Metroplex would say microtransit?
I have a question relevant to that, which is, are you familiar with the bellhop program?
Yeah.
Like, would this give us enough flexibility to run a program similar to that in Issaquah?
Interesting. Is that,
Honestly, we want to look and see.
Yeah.
If it was successful.
I'm not sure who operates bellhop specifically. I know, we've all seen how that looks.
Right.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I would imagine that as written, that would not.
Bellhop is the on-demand service. There's like a little electric cart that goes around Bellevue.
Oh,
It's basically golf
It's meant
carts.
as-
Or you don't get.
Yeah, it's like big golf carts. It's meant as like a last mile solution, right? So it kind of fits into space, but it's on demand, similar to, I guess, Metroflex.
I heard a great joke about this. We would have to call it IHOP. I have to repeat that. Anyways,
Be good advertising for that.
anyways, yeah, so as written, I can change it to generally microtransit in case the name changes, but yeah, I think the intent is just to support the program.
Yeah, and so I think we can have it be, including a continued partnership with King County Metro and sustaining microtransit or first mile, last mile solutions. And just, we name something specific, we set it on a name of a program.
So because Metroflex currently as it is like a new name of the city program. So, yeah.
Which VIA did change their company name to Metroplex.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's fine. Okay.
Oh.
At least their website says that.
I will note that Metroplex system is pretty popular, like it is expanding to other places in King County. So
It is,
it's
yeah.
very popular.
So I'll say, right.
Well, yeah, they might change the name of that, and it's easier if you don't have to change it.
Sure, yeah. So we'll say sustaining microtransit such as Metroplex or, just whatever they call it. Okay. 6.4.2, encouraging sound transit in King County Metro to pursue travel demand management strategies at their park and ride facilities. So this came about through the transit study. It's basically saying like, we don't have any control over their park and ride lots, but if they can promote other uses. So like one example, a classic example is like if Microsoft buses could use that facility too, and like currently not, but maybe in the future. They do that in many other cities, but like they don't do that around here sometimes. So there's like operational issues that occur. So maybe like working through some of those issues. Other transportation demand management things could just be like, better monitoring their facilities and like helping better use them. So this is just an encouragement action. It's not something we have direct control over, but it would certainly help the network if they did that.
Is that a CTR thing or specifically the Microsoft thing would be potentially?
That could be, yeah. Transportation demand management is like beyond CTR. They're related, but this would just be any use beyond like not just commutes, yeah. And then lastly on this slide, 6.5.1, working with Metro to ensure bus stops are located at key destinations. This is something that we currently do. One thing that we'll see next year when light rail connects all the way to Seattle, there's going to be changes to bus service and how that's delivered. That's something that we've worked with Metro on. So we're constantly thinking about how services provided and if there's any ways that we can like ask Metro politely to adjust things to better serve our needs. Next one, 652, working with Metro to ensure that bus stop amenities are provided. So this was mentioned during the transit study. One example is that there's a 554 bus stop that does not have a shelter. So that's something that we've actively been working on. John's been working on that to see if we can get like a shelter so that you don't have to wait out in the rain. So bus stop amenities are really related to like how service is provided and if it feels right to like take the bus or not. So things we can do to like make that a little bit better for transit riders is helpful.
That's one by City Hall.
Yes.
Coming.
Yep, it's coming. Okay, moving on to auto travel 711. We removed the number of concurrency intersections just to keep it compatible in case there's more or less in the future. 731 is revising an existing action, but it's making it related to the parking study. So the previous one was just talking about evaluating parking demand using methods as part of this older study. And this one is specifically looking at a parking policy, making sure that parking is right-sized as a condition of development. So it's more actionable and it gets really to the same ends. It's something that we will be developing this year and it will end by the end of next year.
Is this another place where we're talking about 731 here?
Yes.
Is this another place where it basically says do a study once versus update a study or maintain?
Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah. These are regulations that will be updated regularly. But yeah, we can add some like time to that. We do annual updates of our code. So yeah, okay. 732 is updating development requirements based on recommendations from that parking study. So it's do the study and then change the development requirements based on that. 741 is developing a curb space management plan. And this would look at the different needs that a parking on the street would have, such as loading zones, on-street parking, like if there's bike lanes, for example, if there's stormwater facilities. So this would be context specific, and this really came about through the transit study because as we know, like as Central Issaquah grows, there's going to be more competing needs for that limited on-street parking. So it's thinking about like in specific context, not the whole city, but just like where it matters, like if we can improve efficiency of how things are used.
This is kind of thinking of Bellevue, because Bellevue just recently, a year ago, they adopted something like
They
that.
did, yeah, they did, yeah.
This one struck me as being like often placed in the document, but I'm sure it was hard to find the right place to put that.
It's related in that it's for auto travel.
Yeah,
But
but
yeah.
it's like a non-motorized use of space. Which
I acknowledge that, yeah,
I don't
yeah,
have a suggestion.
yeah,
Seemed a bit odd.
yeah.
Any other thoughts on this slide? No? Well, at this point, I guess it would be helpful to read, if you're like reading out what you've heard.
Sure.
It's not like they're on about things.
Yeah.
That, but just like to make combining minutes easier. Or similar to what we heard from us today.
Sure. Right up here. I also have more about things I took out. Did you want to cover that first or?
lot of that have to do with redundancies, but if you want to cover like the stuff that didn't have to do with redundancies necessarily.
I don't know, props for guys and stuff. I'm not here.
Okay,
Yeah, a lot of this is just redundant, so.
right, it's redundancies and then things we've already done. Okay, so going through, we're good with the name change. We talked about tying things in with actions, so like for instance, 113. Tying that into the next steps with Vision Zero. Spelling out acronyms, tying things to the climate action plan. Yeah, just adding lots of time aspects to many of these policies, changing the words folks to people. In respect to e-bikes, we heard some things about making sure that we have the intent behind the municipal fleet, adding a time frame with light rail planning guide. We talked about e-bike safety and encouraging that. There's a comment about a photo that was, the caption was wrong. Changing Metroflex to be more generic, potentially stating Metroflex, but specifically the microtransit things provided by Metro. And yeah, just add time stamps associated with different actions.
Great. So, any other overall thoughts?
I did, yeah. I got lots of great feedback, appreciate it. So just so this board is in the know, next week I'm taking this to equity board. So the 4th, next Wednesday. Then it's going to Mobility and Infrastructure Council Committee and then to council alongside with the transportation element.
On page 394 of the plan here, there's a definition of transportation advisory board that includes a transportation improvement board segment there, and it's some typos in it.
Okay, yeah, take a look at that.
That's as far as I got.
Okay.
Anyone else medium player?
Not make it.
Well, in that case, I think we've covered the entire discussion and thanks.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay. Now we'll move on to reports with board work plan.
Yes. Nothing too surprising other than next month we have I-90 crossing. Greg will be coming in to chat about that. And then we also are proceeding with the equity training that was requested. I will be giving that training after a lot of deliberation with HR and all these different parties. So, yeah.
In terms of the things that came up today, CTR, it'd be great to get that on schedule at some point.
Yes, CTR is, let me think about this. So the CTR plan is softly due to PSRC late September. So I need to decide if I'm going to bring it to you next month or just tell PSRC, by the way, we're getting some more feedback in October or something like that. But yes, I do intend to bring it.
And the other thing that I think might be interesting to cover would be Vision Zero. That had, pretty big showing in this document. So
Yeah, and there's a lot of different opinions amongst city staff too. So
you get to look at that.
thank you.
Yeah, we'll definitely talk about the timing for all of these in our pre-meeting, so.
Need to add to that, since the emergency things were covered in the MIP, and I don't know how much we talked about that as a board before, so I don't think that needs to happen immediately. I'm just curious what.
That's something we could look into. Yeah, I did some emergency management stuff in grad school, so I'd love to talk about it. But yeah, we could ask to see if anyone has anything to talk about.
There's not another city board that covers that. There's like a department of staff, but not.
I don't know of one. I know we are doing an evacuation study. And I don't know if I don't think it'd be one where there'd be a policy discussion, but if the TAB is interested, it might be something that we could present what we found from it.
I guess it's kind of a draft.
Yeah.
Less of a.
I mean, the tradition is that we like to get things that we actually discuss in action, so.
And maybe
we
it
can
could
think
be
about how this.
an email or a memo to the TAB about it. That way you guys can get information and still utilize your meeting time. The most efficient way possible.
Staff reports, do any staff?
I only have one thing, which is a correction from my presentation on traffic calming last month. I realized 2-3 weeks ago that I was conflating some terms, which led to some different opinions on the board. So I use the term bollards when I meant plastic delineators. For me, this goes back to grad school. We use bollards for everything. So I didn't realize you all meant the concrete metal things that, it's talking about the plastic ones. So as such, John and I have decided to keep those in level 1 since they're very intrusive.
Yeah.
Bollards themselves, I wasn't even considering them. Bollards.
Was it?
Delineators.
Those are the things that like you can smack into and it'll kind of hurt, but like they'll just flop over.
And
Exactly.
you just essentially like concrete anchoring.
Yeah.
Screw or wedging.
Other things are
Well, it's like they actually just, my impression is it's just like tar around the bottom.
It can be a combo.
Those like things on Newport, right?
Yeah. At least the ones on Squawk Mountain, I know it's just tar because some of them have already been knocked off of the
Yes.
road, and I looked at the bottom of it, and it was just tar.
Yeah, there's different ways to do it.
Depends on how.
A lot of
often
cars
you're-
listen to those.
Yes. So that's my only correction, staff report.
I don't have a chair report.
I just want to say that like school starts tomorrow. So yeah, just every day from, like 7:15 a.m. to 8:30 a.m. And then from like 2:30 to 3:45 p.m. expect a lot of traffic in downtown Issaquah.
Does this mean we can give you homework?
What?
You already get homework from the town, right? There's all those emails.
Yeah.
And are there any other business announcements? New business?
I was just gonna mention the equity board on 9/4, but we covered that already.
Okay, and please, with no other business announcements, we're adjourned at 7:58. All right. Thanks, everybody.